Hey guys, what's up? So as you can see, hopefully by this video, I have a brand new camera that I'm using. This is a Nikon D5500. I just got this thing for Christmas. Now I'm also going to not only give out my top 10 albums of the year, but also an honorable mention. The Rolling Stone, Blues and Lonesome. It's been a while since the classic rockers have done an album. I think it's been since 2005. And this definitely sounds like true Rolling Stones. Like the first time I heard this, I was like, yeah, this is like definitely like Rolling Stones. But a lot of the songs are a lot more slower paced and they have this really cool chugging kind of bluesy groove to them. Mick Jagger, of course, still has that real edge and rawness to his voice. Like pretty much sounds like what you would hear from him on their really old material. And with these slower, more bluesier jams, you get some really cool, intricate guitar that's just mean and in your face. Even though all the songs are slow, I really like how the band could do that on this album. And I think it's definitely something you should check out. There's a lot of like really neat influences here, not just blues, but you also hear country vibes. They bring in harmonica in a lot of these songs. My favorites off of this album are Everyone Knows About My Good, Commit a Crime, and Hate to See You Go. Number 10 on my list is Tegan Sara's Love You to Death. If you guys don't know, I'm a big Tegan Sara fan, and they've always been like one of my favorite like bands per se. Always have had a connection with their music. And on this album, Tegan Sara is continuing to do more of the synth-driven pop songs, but they bring us something more well put together than what they did on the last record, Heartthrob. Go more for this 80s synth feel with the beats. There's a lot more songs on this album that are very pleasing to the ears with dancey beats and upbeat catchy choruses. Like this album is definitely something really fun. There's a lot of emotional tracks on here too. They kind of will bring it slow, but they also keep things really interesting. So I think this time around Tegan Sara really kind of came back and did a comeback album that just kind of totally kicks Heartthrob, their last album, into the ground. My favorites off of this one are Stop Desire, Dying to Know, and On to the Night. Number 9 for me, which is probably a shocker to a lot of people if they know how I feel about this band, is Pierce the Veil's Misadventures. I'm really not the biggest Pierce the Veil fan. I was really into them when the Flare of the Dramatic album came out. I loved that, and then the band kind of was something I just outgrew. But this album really surprised me with the heavy and yet great guitar hooks and their ability to step out of their comfort zone more on this album, I feel like. Such as the poppy but yet heavy instrumental Floral and Fading. I just love this song. It's got like this very sing-along chorus to it, but yet it has this nice kind of heavy bass groove that just keeps the song going. And it still has some like nice downtoned guitars with the steady drum beat that keeps the song going. And Bedless is also another one. This one's more upbeat, really catchy, but super kind of poppy and fun, but still kind of keeping the elements of that more intricate guitar work. And then they also have songs that still stick to their more hardcore roots, like on Texas Is Forever and The Divine Zero. My favorites out of these are Floral and Fading, which I just listed, Bedless, and The Divine Zero. Number 8 on my list is a really sentimental album to me, Slingshot Dakotas Break. And this was a band that I recently just found in the summer of this year. And this band was a real gem to find. And it's crazy to me how it's literally just two people in a band. It's a husband and a wife. Carly, who does the singing and she does keyboards, and then Tom, who just does the drums. And I think it's great how these two work so well together, being a husband and wife and not letting it get to their head and writing all this vast material about different things, and you really see that on this album. The singer Carly has an amazing, more higher vocal register, and she uses the keyboard to make these really cool effects of almost like this distorted guitar. Like it actually, I thought like they had a guitar player in this band, and then when I like did my research and I actually saw them live, like nope, it was just Carly on the keyboard. And then Tom, their drummer, just pounds away at all these songs and does these really awesome, precise, but crazy fills on songs like Storytellers, Monocracy. And the melodies of these songs come from the heart, and you can really feel it with each song. Like how you can see that, and they continued that from their previous work, but this album just feels a lot more mature from them. It's so much on this album to dive into. My favorites on this album are Newlyweds, Break, and Too Much. Number 7 on my list is probably an album that people did not expect at all, because I really don't talk about a lot of pop music on my channel unless it's like Demi Lovato or something, but I do love some pop music, and Beyonce I've been a fan of time and time again. Sometimes she'll put out material that's like okay and some of it's just not good at all. This album, Lemonade, is so different than anything she's ever put out. Her voice feels a lot more real and natural. You hear a lot more soul in her voice in tracks like Freedom and Sandcastles. The lyrics are a lot more real and honest. There's just so many things she's touched on besides just relationships and basic things. I feel like this album goes a lot more in depth. You also hear more organic instrumentation on this album, such as songs like Daddy Lessons, that's a little bit more country blues style, and Don't Hurt Yourself, that also features Jack White, who brings this real rawness and rock edge that totally, I feel like, brings out a different side of Beyonce. This is hands down definitely the best pop album of the year. The guest vocalist spots on this album help bring this album up instead of drag it down. One flaw on this album is the very last track, which is Formation. It just feels so out of place with the rest of this album. It feels like it really shouldn't be even there, so I kind of just pretend like that song's not even there. My favorites off of this one are definitely Sorry, Sandcastles, and Daddy Lessons, but it's really honestly hard to pick a favorite. Number 6 on my list is Macklemore and Ryan Lewis's Unruly, Mess I've Made. Now, I was kind of having high expectations for this album because their last album, The Heist, was absolutely one of my favorite rap, hip-hop albums ever. I mean, some people don't consider Macklemore, like rap music per se, because it's not your traditional rap, because there's definitely more pop melodies in his songs. I really gotta say, I don't think this is better than The Heist, but this is definitely a well executed album. Collection of tracks on here that are really fun, like Downtown, Dance Off, Brad Pitt's Cousin. 2 more serious tracks on this album like Grow Up, Heaven, and White Privilege. Macklemore's rapping, I definitely think he stepped it up a little bit more on this album. It feels like he has a lot more force on it, and some of the verses on this album, he just attacks it with his use of flow. As far as Ryan Lewis, I definitely think he also stepped up on this album. On the beats, they feel a lot more noticeable on this album, whereas on The Heist, it kind of felt like they were on the back burner and he wasn't really like making them a big focus on each song, whereas you can really hear more of the beats and how well the production is on this album. My favorites are St. Ives, White Privilege 2, and Kevin. Number 5 for me was Omarosa's 131, and this is their second album with Bradley Walden, who is the more, I don't want to say new vocalist, but the vocalist after Johnny Craig left the band. And on the last record, I felt like he was a really good replacement. On this record, it just shows even more. This album is full with a lot of emotion, a lot of soul and heart that you hear from Bradley's voice. There's a good balance on this album of these big sing-along melodic choruses to more of these soft, slow tracks that create a perfect mix of a top-notch album. My favorites off of this one are Sure, Hurt, and Blue. Number 4 for me is Balance and Composure's Light We Made. This album, you kind of see Balance and Composure taking a step away from what they usually do and experimenting a little bit, which is actually why I really liked this album a lot more than I thought I would. Balance and Composure usually has this good mix of heavy, angsty rawness to their music, and then on this you see them going for a lot more of this chill, laid-back direction, but adding in some really cool atmospheric and spacey effects. There's more use of the drum machine here, and John Simmons is taking a step back a little bit more vocally from this album, so instead of these punchy vocals, you're hearing a lot more of a softer approach. Hearing different textures on this album is like a breath of fresh air, and I think they pulled it off really well by not going so much in your face and just having an album that's very laid back. This album is really great to drive to at night. It kind of just puts you in like this zone, in this trance, and I just love it. My favorites off of this album are Midnight Zone, Lone, and for a walk. Number 3 is Weezer's White album. From start to finish, this album has a perfect flow to it, from transitioning to track. It has a good mix of being cohesive, but also diverse. There's a lot of different influences on this album. You can hear more of their traditional surf rock vibes with these upbeat songs, and then they also have some really good, more laid-back jams. River's vocal range on this album feels a lot like more of their earlier work as well. This album, it's basically this kind of story about, I feel like, how somebody goes to California to kind of get away, and they think that California is a great spot to have like a summer vacation, and they basically end up getting their heart broken in California. So I feel like this is like the story that this album is telling, and I feel like it tells it really well. Pulled off a really great theme on this album, and every track just like connects together perfectly. My favorites off of this album are Summery Lane and Drunk Dory, Jacked Up, and California Kids. Number 2 on my list is Sayo's Along the Shadow. If you guys don't know, I'm a huge Anthony Green fan. He's one of my favorite vocalists. He's also in one of my favorite bands, Circa Survive. And he actually decided to come back and record with Sayo. I don't know if he's like an official member in the band now, but I know he did a tour with them. I think this is his first time singing back on this album since like 2004, and it almost feels like he never left. If anything, I think his voice on Sayo now sounds a lot better than the older stuff. I really love the whole mood this album gives. All the dark guitar and bass tones. It's more of a darker but angsty album, but it also has this brightness in it, and I think it's just because of how amazing Anthony Green's vocals are on this. He brings this sort of beautiful lightness to the album that's more dark instrumentally. Also, I really like how Anthony Green does a little bit of like this edgy, raw screaming on this album. You can really feel the passion in his voice, and you hear it a little bit on his other stuff from Circa Survive, but you really hear it a lot more on this album. My favorites off of this album are Second Guesses, The Stutter Says a Lot, and Ideology is a Theft. And number 1, ooh, that was 2. Number 1 is The Devil Wears Prada's Transit Blues. Devil Wears Prada has always been one of my favorite metal bands. They kind of first started out more in the hardcore scene, and then starting on Dead Throne, they started to branch out really into more of a metal ground, and they kind of always tried to expand their sound. And I feel like they'll try to come up with new ways of, okay, how can we break out of this metal formula? This album is no exception from that. This album is very dynamically sound. It flawlessly goes from heavy to soft, or soft to heavy perfectly. You hear a lot of these tracks and you're kind of wondering, is this the same song? But it draws it so nicely in and just transitions perfectly into all these different tempo changes that just work together. Mike's vocals on this album are also a little bit more different. I feel like he's not as in your face with his screaming and doing all this crazy screaming. Instead, you kind of also see him do some spoken word on this album. This is probably one of the most versatile full-length albums that The Devil Wears Prada has ever put out. And this is why this album is my favorite of the year, is because they were able to pull off something so well that was still a part of their territory, but they were also kind of going out of their comfort zone. And my favorites off of this album are Flyover States, The Condition, and Praise Poison. That was my top 10 albums of the year. Definitely see a lot more different kinds of videos from me in the future. There'll be more album reviews. Hopefully I'll be putting up some covers and original songs. I definitely want to do some more countdown videos, so comment down below suggestions on what you guys would like to also see me do on this channel. It can be covers, it can be anything. I would just really appreciate the feedback. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe, guys, because I will be putting out more quality content if you want to hear me talk about music all the time. Hit that like button down there. I know you want to, just because it's the end of the year and I tried to have a good hair day today, but it just, the beanie hat thing looks kind of decent, whatever. Also, check down below my social media sites if you guys want to follow me on Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram. Those will all be down there as well. And as usual, guys, stay brutal, stay tuned for more videos, and see you guys later. And also have a fantastic New Year.